There is a Y-chromosome haplogroup that peaks, with striking concentration, in one population in the Balkans and traces almost nowhere else in the surrounding region, not in Serbia, not in North Macedonia, not in Bulgaria, not in any of the populations that share borders, shared mountains, shared centuries of contested territory with Albania, only in Albanians. And the reason it is almost exclusive to them is not because they are newcomers from somewhere else, it is because they are the ones who did not move. That is the destination. But the only way to understand how a population arrives there is to understand what happened to everyone around them. A landmark 2023 study analyzed over 6,000 ancient West Eurasian genomes alongside 74 newly sequenced modern Albanians. The authors used a specific phrase to describe what they found in medieval Albania. They called it a genetic refugium, a population that had sheltered its Bronze Age ancestry through a migration wave that transformed every surrounding Balkan people. What they found when they looked at medieval Albanian bones was, in their own words, a pattern distinct from neighboring Balkan regions. A pattern that had been running, measurably, for over 3,000 years, and no subsequent wave of history, Roman, Byzantine, Slavic, or Ottoman, fully erased it. Go back to the 5th century. The Roman Empire was fracturing. The western half was already gone. What happened next reshaped the genetic map of the Balkans in a way that most people have never heard of, and that is the reason this story exists. Between roughly 500 and 700 CE, Slavic-speaking populations from the northeast expanded across the Balkans in one of the most demographically consequential migrations in European history. They did not just conquer, they settled. They interbred with local populations at such scale that the genetic profile of Croats, Serbs, Bulgarians, and Macedonians was substantially transformed. The Y-chromosome haplogroup, I2A, the classic Slavic paternal marker, is dominant today across the South Slavic world. It was not there in the Bronze Age. It arrived with those migrations and it stayed. What the 2023 genomic transect found in medieval Albania, however, is this: minimal Slavic genetic contribution. While the rest of the Balkans was being genetically rebuilt, Albania's population, sheltered in the mountain interior, largely preserved what it already had. Slavic admixture did eventually enter, somewhere between 18 and 48% in modern Albanians, but studies show this admixture was predominantly female-mediated. Slavic women married into Albanian communities. Albanian paternal lines remained intact. They were not replaced. They were already there and they stayed. The consequence of that survival is visible in the genome today. The 3 haplogroups most characteristic of Albanians, EV13R1b and J2BL283, are all found in the Balkans since the Bronze Age. All 3 predate Rome. All 3 predate the Slavic migrations. All 3 are measurably continuous from ancient Balkan populations. And the most distinctively Albanian of them, J2BL283, is almost exclusively theirs. Which brings us back to the reason this population looks so different from its neighbors on a genetic chart. Haplogroup J2BL283 experienced what geneticists call a major founder effect along the Adriatic coast. During the Bronze Age and Iron Age, it accounted for 50 to 70% of all male lineages in ancient Western Balkan populations, in sites archaeologically linked to Illyrian cultural expressions. Today, the oldest J2BL283 sample from the Albanian territory dates to approximately the 19th century before the Common Era from a site in northern Albania. Modern northern Albanians carrying this haplogroup are estimated to be approximately 50 to 60 generations distant from Bronze Age Dalmatian individuals who carry the same marker. That is not proximity. That is continuity. When I first read that figure, 50 to 60 generations, what it required was not surprise, but a second reading, because that is a genuinely unusual finding in a region that everyone knows has been fought over, invaded, and resettled for 3,000 years. It means that in the mountains of northern Albania, a paternal line has been running essentially uninterrupted, since people were burying their dead in tumuli on the Adriatic coast, and the Greeks hadn't yet named the region they were building in. What does it mean that the genome preserved what every conqueror thought they had replaced? Here is the part that most complicates the story. J2BL283 did not stay in the Balkans. Ancient DNA carrying this marker has been found in southern Italy, in regions where the Messapians lived, a people who arrived in the Italian heel from across the Adriatic, likely from Illyrian territory. two mercenaries from the Battle of Himera in Sicily, 480 BCE, clustered genetically on a principal component analysis with Bronze Age Albania. The Albanian paternal signal crossed the Adriatic before Rome existed. The population that the Slavic migrations would later leave largely untouched had already, centuries before those migrations, sent its genetics across the sea to southern Italy, where they persist to this day. The mountain that kept the Bronze Age ancestry inside also launched it westward before the wall went up. There is a specific problem this creates for the historical record, and it is one that geneticists now have a clear answer to. Albanians appear in written historical sources only in the 11th century CE. The first known text written in Albanian, a Catholic liturgy called the Mesheri, dates to 1555. For centuries, this silence was used as evidence that Albanians were late arrivals, migrants who had moved into the Balkans after the Slavic wave and were not, as they claimed, the descendants of the ancient Illyrians. The genomic evidence from 2023 makes that argument very difficult to sustain. Present-day Albanians predominantly descend from early medieval inhabitants already present in Albania as early as 800 to 900 CE. The study found preceding their historical attestation by more than 2 centuries. The silence in the record was not evidence of absence, it was evidence of suppression. The Ottoman Empire, which controlled Albanian lands from the 1480s to 1912, suppressed Albanian language education. The language existed. The empire simply made sure it was not written down. And here is where the story turns back on itself. 500 years of Ottoman rule, 5 centuries during which Albanian culture was substantially shaped by Ottoman architecture, vocabulary, religion, cuisine, and daily practice. The Arabic and Turkish loanwords are in every Albanian sentence spoken today. The minarets are in every Albanian city. The Ottoman imprint on Albanian civilization is profound and visible. What the genome records from those 500 years is, by every current genetic analysis, essentially nothing in terms of Turkish or Central Asian ancestry. The Ottoman Empire shaped Albanian culture more deeply than almost any other force in their history. Their genetic trace in the Albanian paternal record barely registers. Culture outlasted DNA. Again, the Moorish case in Portugal established this paradox for Western Europe. The Albanian case establishes it for the Balkans. The Ottomans built mosques, rewrote the language, converted roughly 70% of the population to Islam, and produced from Albanian ranks some of the most powerful grand viziers in Ottoman history, including the entire Koprulu dynasty that effectively ran the empire in the 17th century. Genetically, it left almost no mark on the Albanian population at all. The conqueror's administrative grip was total. The conqueror's DNA did not follow. I keep returning to what that means for the central question of this video. We asked why Albanians are genetically unlike their Balkan neighbors. The answer that the research gives is more precise than the question deserved. Albanians are not strange. Albanians are what the Balkans looked like in the Bronze Age. Every other Balkan population moved away from that baseline during the Slavic migrations. Albania's mountain interior held. The Slavic wave broke around it. And because everyone else changed and Albanians didn't, Albanians appear as the anomaly on the genetic chart, when in fact they are the baseline that everyone else diverged from. The language, which has no close relative in any living Indo-European branch, preserves this too. Albanian is the sole surviving member of its own branch of the Indo-European family, not a dialect of anything, not a close cousin of anything. The only language that kept running from whatever Paleo-Balkan tongue was spoken in the Western Balkans before Greek, before Latin, before any written record. The genome and the language are telling the same story. This is a population that stayed when everything around it moved. The final detail that earns its place here, not earlier. The 2023 study also found that at the peak of the migration period, medieval Albanian populations showed genetic links as far as Pannonia, modern Hungary. Not because Albanians were moving north, because the last remnants of the Bronze Age Balkan genetic world, shrinking under Slavic pressure, were converging on the places that still held it. The Refugium was not just preserving one population, it was the last place where an entire ancient genetic world could still be found. And the Albanians, in surviving, became its archive. Albania preserved a 3,000-year-old genetic inheritance through Rome, through Byzantium, through a Slavic migration that transformed every surrounding people, through 5 centuries of Ottoman rule. It changed its religion, it changed its language's vocabulary, it changed its architecture, its music, its food. The genome did not change. If you have Albanian roots, or roots anywhere the ancient Illyrians once moved, along the Adriatic coast, down into southern Italy, across the mountains to Kosovo and North Macedonia, part of your paternal line may run unbroken to the Bronze Age Western Balkans. The Bronze Age is in there, the mountain wall is in there, and so is the reason 500 years of empire left almost no trace when it tried to come home in the blood. If you're still here, thank you. That's not something I take for granted. If this story gave you something, a like is the simplest way to give something back, and it genuinely affects how many people find it. For anyone who keeps coming back to ancient DNA, to the civilizations that disappeared from the record, but not from the genome, to the version of history that only becomes visible when you look at the biology rather than the documents, subscribing is worth it. Share this with someone who carries Albanian roots, or with anyone who has ever suspected that the Balkans hold more history than the textbooks ever made room for. And if anything here shifted how you see it, the Bronze Age paternal lines still running in northern Albania, the 5 centuries of Ottoman rule that left almost nothing in the blood, I want to hear about it. The comments on this one will be worth reading. Thanks for being here.